Okay, so we're going to talk about the integumentary system or the skin or the integument. So some parts of the world do not refer to our integumentary system as the integument, they just refer to it as the skin. Even some medical textbooks do not have a section known as the integumentary system or the integument. They just have what's known as the skin. So this skin is very important for various reasons. It is very important for various reasons. Number one, the skin is your first line of defense. See, the skin is the barrier that is the frontier of your immune system. If there is an infectious organism, there is a dangerous bacteria or a parasite that is trying to enter your body, it has to first go through the skin. So the skin is equipped with built-in resident sentinel immune cells that are there to detect if there is any invasion from any form of an infectious organism. These resident sentinel cells, these macrophages known as the dendritic cells, they are able to fight on our behalf these invading microbes. But at the same time, they can contact nearby in the bloodstream these circulating monocytes and cause them to aggregate and exit through the endothelial gaps so they can enter the tissue and remove and fight and combat these infectious microorganisms and remove the necrotic debris and begin the path for healing. So the immune system is reliant on your skin. So what is the first function of the skin? It's for immune defense. It's our first line of defense. What's the second function of the skin? Thermal regulation. Remember when we began this course, we discussed homeostasis, and we said that homeostasis is ensuring that we have a constant internal environment despite the external environment changing. The external environment could be so hot, but you are not going to be as hot as the environment. The environment could be snowing, very cold, and you will not be as cold. So if there is hyperthermia, it's too hot, or there is hypothermia, it's too cold, your body is equipped with built-in homeostatic systems, negative feedback systems that repair this deviation, that stimulating your internal environment temperature to deviate. It will lock it into a homeostatic thermal range, and that is 37 degrees Celsius. That is known as euthermia. We do not want hyperthermia or hypothermia. We want euthermia. So part of how euthermia is achieved is by those glands, the sweat glands that are on the surface of our skin. This sweat is majorly water and solutes with salt. And that sweat, because it contains water, it will have high specific heat capacity. This high specific heat capacity is able to shunt heat away from the body and dissipate it to the environment. So when it's very hot, what happens? You need to know this. This is really important. When it's so hot, your blood vessels are going to dilate. When the blood vessels dilate, they accommodate more blood. And this more blood is now flowing closer to the periphery. And when this blood is flowing closer to the periphery, heat is dissipating from your body, the really hot body, into the air and into the sweat. So the sweat is going to absorb the heat from your body and evaporate. This sweat is also important because it's like a screen, a capsule that prevents this sunlight from directly hitting your tissues. So it's very important to appreciate that the integumentary system is important because it has intimate attachment with the blood vessels underneath the basement membrane. and it can be a mediator of heat exchange with the surrounding when it's too hot to conserve our internal euthermia, or it can cause vasoconstriction and prevent the heat loss through the skin. So that's the second function. The first function of the skin is that it's an important immune front. It is a barrier, a fence. And these epithelial cells that make up the skin, they are so closely attached together by tight junctions, by caps, CAPs, cell adhesion proteins, or CAMs, CAMs, cell adhesion molecules. They are so closely attached together, they do not even allow the passage of water to seep through the skin, let alone allowing bacteria to seep through and enter the skin. So when bacteria makes it through your body, you have to rest assured that the bacteria was able to somehow degrade the tissue, break this fence. So the skin is the first line defense. In your home, you have a fence around your house, you have gates that you lock to prevent the invaders and the intruders from trespassing and entering. But that does not mean all of them are going to stay outside. Some intruders can even break the fence. They can break the door and come in. In that case, you're going to have to call the police. You're going to have to call, you have to get your own, for example, weapons for protection and so on and so forth. So the same thing in your immune system, if some bacteria are strong enough to make it through your skin, then your immune system is going to recruit the B cells and the T cells. And that's known as adaptive immunity. We'll get to that later. But you have to understand that the skin is important for being a first line of defense, innate immunity, natural immunity, and also the skin is important for thermal regulation. The third important thing is that skin is very important for social image. Skin is very important for personal and self-image. There is a whole billion-dollar industry that is all about your skin color, your skin tone. Do you have acne? You're not supposed to get acne. If you don't have acne, that's better. If you do this, then our skin is going to be a form of self-reflection. So some people will not even leave the house without looking at the mirror. So this is how we present ourselves to the society through our skin, and how we present ourselves to our own self. So skin is very important for self-image. Skin is important also for social interactions. A mother can look at the face of her baby and she knows exactly if he is hungry or if he wants to sleep, or people can just read the emotion, the faces of each other. They can read if somebody is angry or if somebody is happy or if somebody is. So that's why they think emotions are a physiological response. You cannot hide your emotion. All these actors in the movie, they can fake crying or fake being happy as much as they can, but it will never be like, they can never initiate a physiological integumentary response. So the skin is very important. Also, you have to understand that, when compared to other animals, when compared to, for example, monkeys, as a medical doctor or a nurse, the first step is to look at the patient and to examine and inspect the patient to see, does the patient have a bruise? Is the patient cyanotic? They have a bluish discoloration of the face. Do the patients have some form of bilirubin breakdown and they have jaundice? Is the patient in a good state of mind? Are they in a good health? In good mental health? That all could be told by the skin, by looking at facial expressions. But you cannot, when you are a veterinarian, when you are the doctor for the animals, no doctor for the animals can assess the psychological well-being of a monkey just by looking at the face and telling if the monkey is happy or not. But you can do that with human beings. So the skin is very important. So dermatology is the scientific study and the medical treatment of the integumentary system. So inspecting the skin and the hair and the nails. That is all part of the integumentary system. It is the largest system in our body. It's about 2 meters long if they spread out your skin. So the skin is not just, the integumentary system is not just the skin. Remember when we talked about how tissues, they never are existing in isolation. The tissues are always connected and cooperating together. So you have in the skin, what kind of tissue is the skin? So if we want to learn about a particular organ system, we have to begin with the tissues. And we learned last week that we have how many different types of tissues? 4. So the first one is the bone tissue and the epithelial tissue. And then you have 2 tissues, the muscular tissue and the nervous tissue. And both of those are excitable tissues. These excitable tissues are tissues that are able to receive input that is based on membrane voltage change. So these electrolytes flow down concentration gradient from an area of a higher concentration to an area of a lower concentration, or an area of a lower concentration to an area of a higher concentration. When this change, when this influx of electrolytes and the efflux of electrolytes takes place, that changes the membrane voltage. That change in the membrane voltage in one place, not the other, is going to constitute for us a stimulus. That stimulus can be propagated and it can be integrated to generate a form of an output. So when you shake somebody's hand with your right hand, not with the left, why do you feel their hand on the right, not on the left? Because it is those mechanoreceptors, those nerve cells who are on your left, on your right hand, their membrane channels open, and then there's an influx of calcium, and then there's an efflux of potassium, leading to the depolarization phase and the hyperpolarization phase of the membrane membrane. So it's very important for you to appreciate how the skin is intimately connected with other tissues like the nervous tissue. Also, the muscular tissue is also associated with the integumentary system, because the muscular tissue, when we are undergoing thermal regulation, when we are going through shivering thermogenesis, who's shivering? Who's shivering? Is my skin shivering? No, it's the underlying muscular tissue that is excitable. Remember, we said the muscular tissue is excitable. The muscular tissue receives electron. It receives electron and it receives membrane voltage change due to the disruption of the disequilibrium of these sodiums flowing down concentration gradient and potassium flowing out concentration gradient, and that changes the membrane voltage. Okay, so the skin or the integument is the body's largest and heaviest organ. So the skin consists of 2 layers: the epidermis, which is the stratified squamous epithelium, and the dermis, which is a deeper connective tissue layer. So below the dermis is the hypodermis, which is not part of the skin, but usually studied with it. So these are the epidermis, and this is the upper layer is your epidermis, followed by the dermis, which is right below. And do not forget your subcutaneous hypodermis tissue. This is the subcutaneous fat tissue. This is the 3rd layer from the bottom. So the skin and the subcutaneous tissue are very important, because the skin thickness ranges from 0.5 to 6 millimeters. So the thickness range is mainly due to a variation in the dermis thickness, but the skin is classified as thick or thin based on the epidermis. So the thick skin covers the palms, the soles, and the corresponding surfaces of the fingers and the toes. So it has sweat glands, but no hair follicles or sebaceous gland or sebaceous oil gland. So the epidermis is about zero point 0.5 millimeters thick. That is primarily due to the thick stratum corneum. So you know the skin is not evenly distributed throughout our body. The eyelid is so thin, yet your palm is so thick and the sole of your feet are so thick. So you can see now that is based on the function. So if the palms are thick, that means their job is to grab something. But if our eyelids are as thick as our soles of our the bottom of our feet and as thick as our palms, then that's a problem. Then it's gonna cause some form of stress and trauma to our eyes. So the reason due to the thickness is because of a layer in the epidermis known as the stratum corneum. So the thin skin covers the rest of the body and it has hair follicles and sebaceous glands and sweat glands. The epidermis is about zero point 0.1 millimeters thick. Resistance to trauma and infections. So you have to understand that keratin is a form of a secondary protein. So you know that proteins fold upon themselves. We have a primary layer of protein that comes right off the ribosome, like beads in a string, like amino acids connected together by peptide bonds. That is a primary structure. Then your primary structure is going to fold upon itself due to weak bonds known as hydrogen bonds, known as disulfide bridges, known as salt bridges, known as hydrophobic effects. These are weak bonds. These are not covalent bonds. It is only the peptide bond that is covalent bond. So what happens now is that primary sequence of the beads on the string, they start to revolve around themselves and they start to make a helix loop and they start to make a beta pleated sheet structure. So that's a secondary structure. A perfect example of a secondary structure protein is what? Keratin and collagen. They are perfect example of secondary structure protein. You also have to understand that there are dermacidins, defensins. These dermacidins are chemicals. These are substances that are secreted on the skin. They're secreted on the skin, and they provided a form of a form of a burning chemical that is like lava if there is any bacteria or any virus or any parasite or any infectious microorganism. This acid mantle that is made up of dermacidins. What are the dermacidins? That's acid, there's hydrolytic enzymes, metalloproteinases, proteolytic enzymes, degradative enzymes. All of these enzymes, they degrade, and they are like a capsule that is around the skin of a pH of 4 to 6 pH. That's slightly acidic, but it's dangerous enough to destroy all of these organisms. If it was pH 1, then that can destroy even your own skin. So it's moderately acidic. So the skin is important because it's a barrier to the sunlight. We're going to learn today that melanin is like a sunscreen. You know, people wear black eyeglasses or black sunglasses. These sunglasses are black because they deflect the ultraviolet radiation, protect your eyes from the sunlight. The same thing, melanin protects your DNA from sunlight. So that's why there is a lot of skin cancer prevalent in people who are not black, dark color. Because if you are black, you have a lot of melanin that's going to shade your nucleus and your DNA from ultraviolet radiation. But if you, so why are there people who are darker in skin color and people who are lighter in skin color? And the reason is not because people who are darker in skin color have more number of melanocytes. No, we all have the same exact number of melanocytes. But the rate of melanin that is being secreted is much less in Caucasian compared to African descent. And also the way the melanin is structured. The melanin is so compacted and tight together in dark skinned people compared to very light skinned people that their melanin is so spread out, is not sticking together. The skin is important for vitamin D synthesis. So the skin carries out the first step in preparing and activating vitamin D, and vitamin D is important for the reabsorption for the absorption of calcium from our intestine into the body. Sensation. So there are many nerve endings that react to various stimuli. There are many nerve endings that react to various stimuli. The skin has a lot of nerves. It's very sensitive. Our skin is very sensitive. That's why we are sensitive to light touch. And there are many tactile receptors, tactile cells, mechanoreceptors that enable us to feel the touch through the skin. That's why when you get a needle injection, it only hurts when it touches your skin. But when it goes deeper into the tissue, deeper into the muscle, you don't feel it no more because there are no tactile receptors in the muscle. It's only on the outer layer, only on the skin. And we talked about how the skin is so important for thermal regulation, and the skin is important for thermal regulation because it alters the blood flow to release or retain the heat. So cutaneous vasoconstriction and cutaneous vasodilation. Nonverbal communication is facial expression. We said that we use the skin to project our facial expression. So you see on B, you can tell that young girl is, men cannot read face as well as women. So I can tell she's not happy. But what is that? I have no idea. So what is she now? Is she upset? She's angry. What is that? She's sad. She's sad. She's not angry. I know that's negative, but what is that? I have no idea. But the monkey, you can never tell anything. You can never tell if the monkey is sad. You can tell it. I think he's up to no good, but I don't know what he's plotting something. He looks like he's plotting something, but I don't know what is in his side of his mind. That's why it's easier to be a medical doctor because you can read the face of the patient, but you cannot be a veterinarian and being able to read the face of the monkey. That's their structure is not helpful because our skin is attached to our muscular tissue, and then we are able to modify our facial expression. Okay, general features of the epidermis. So the epidermis is made up of keratinized, that means it has a lot of keratin, stratified squamous epithelium. We said that when it comes to epithelium, we can never describe epithelium except we use two criteria. The first criteria is the epithelial tissue type. Is it simple epithelium, meaning all of the epithelial cells are attached to the basement membrane, or is it stratified epithelium? And in stratified epithelium, the cells are jumping on the top of one another. And there is a gray area between the stratified and the simple, and we call that pseudo-stratified, where the cells Part of them touches the basement membrane, and the other part is on top of other cells. So that's how we describe the type of epithelial tissue: stratified, or simple, or pseudostratified. But we're not done. There is another classification. Are we squamous, meaning the cell is like a sunny side up egg, an egg sunny side up. The nucleus is like facing the top. And then there is cuboidal, where the cells are evenly in their width and length. That's cuboidal epithelium. And then there is columnar, where cells are more long than they are wide. And that is known as columnar. Excellent. So a tissue is either stratified, columnar, stratified, squamous, stratified, cuboidal, or simple squamous, simple cuboidal, or simple columnar. What tissue is my skin? Stratified, squamous, sunny side egg up, stratified, they are on top of each other. The skin is also avascular. It is not having blood vessels through it. And that would be very bad if that was the case, because if you touch something that is corrosive, you're going to bleed to death. But they are intimately touched with the basement membrane, and the basement membrane is really vascularized. So that's why a bruise, and that's how we detect physical abuse when there is like the rupture of blood vessels on the skin surface. And the epidermis, so that is the layer of the epidermis. It is keratinized or stratified squamous epithelium. So the epidermis also contains sparse nerve endings for touch and for the pain. The cells of the epidermis there are 5 types of the cells that make up the epidermis. There's the keratinocytes. The keratinocytes are great majority of epidermal cells. They synthesize keratin. And the stem cells are undifferentiated cells that give rise to keratinocytes in the deepest layer of the epidermis, known as the stratum basale. Melanocytes synthesize pigment melanin that shields the DNA from ultraviolet. They shield the DNA from ultraviolet radiation. They occur only in the stratum basale, but have branched processes that spread among the keratinocytes and distribute melanin via the melanosomes. So there are 5 epidermal cell types. There's the tactile cells and the dendritic cells. So the tactile cells are touch receptor cells that are associated with the dermal nerve fibers. There are tactile discs, and these are collective. Tactile disc is a collective term for the tactile cell and the associated nerve fiber. And these are found in the basal layer of the epidermis. So dendritic cells, these are phagocytic immune cells that guard against the toxins, against the microbes, and they are found in the stratum spinosum and stratum granulosum. You see, this layer is now depicting for us the process of exfoliation and how the tissue grows upside down from all the way in the bottom, starts migrating to the top, leading to the shedding of these keratinocytes. Okay, so cells of the epidermis are arranged in 4 to 5 zones or strata. They are listed here from superficial to deep. There are the stratum basale, the stratum spinosum, and the stratum granulosum. The stratum basale, these are single layers of stem cells and keratinocytes resting on the basement membrane. Also, they contain scattered melanocytes and tactile cells. The stratum spinosum is made up of several layers of living keratinocytes These are joined by desmosomes and tight junctions. They are named for the appearance of cells after histological preparation, known as the spiny. Also, they also contain some dendritic cells. The stratum granulosum is comprised of 3 to 5 layers of flat, living keratinocytes. These cells contain dark containing keratinohyaline granules. There is the stratum lucidum and the stratum corneum, and these are thin, pale layer that are found only in the thick skin. The keratinocytes are packed with clear protein known as eladin, and the stratum corneum is up to 30 layers of dead, scaly keratinized cells. They resist the abrasion, they resist the penetration and the water loss. So remember that the exfoliation takes place when the keratinocytes are growing and they make specks that are on the surface, the top of the skin that would exfoliate and die and be removed as necrotic debris. So now we finished the epidermis, and now let's look at the layer right below the epidermis, and that is the dermis. The dermis is a connective tissue layer. It is not epithelial tissue layer. It is about 0.2 millimeters to 4 millimeters thick. They are composed mainly of collagen. They also contain elastic and reticular fibers. They are well supplied with blood vessels, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and nerve endings. They house hair follicles and nail roots. So the muscles of the facial expression attach to the dermis. They are made up of wavy, conspicuous boundary between the dermis and the epidermis. So the dermal papilla are upward finger-like extensions of the dermis, and the epidermal ridges are downward waves of the epidermis. The dermis consists of 2 zones, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The papillary layer is a thin zone of areolar tissue in and near the dermal papilla, and they allow for the mobility of leukocytes and other defense cells, and they are rich in small blood vessels. Reticular layer is the deeper, thicker layer of the dermis. It is composed of dense, irregular connective tissue. There are stretch marks known as striae, and these represent tears in the collagen fibers caused by stretching of the skin due to pregnancy or obesity. So the reticular layer is composed of damaged dermal blood vessels made up of burns or caused by burns or shoe friction, and they may cause serous fluid to seep out and form a blister between the dermis and the epidermis. So that shows us our papillary layer of the dermis, and these are both made up of connective tissue. You have the papillary layer, and right below it is the reticular layer of the dermis. Then there's the hypodermis. The hypodermis is a subcutaneous tissue layer of connective tissue that is beneath the skin, and it contains more areolar and adipose tissue than the dermis, and it pads the body and binds the skin to the underlying tissue. So the common site of drug injection is the hypodermis, this subcutaneous tissue, and that is due to many blood vessels. There's subcutaneous fat. The subcutaneous fat refers to the subcutaneous tissue that is comprised predominantly of adipose tissue. So the subcutaneous fat and these lipids are a perfect example of a useful macromolecule for energy saving, for thermal insulation, and we usually find the subcutaneous fat thicker in women and thinner in infants. So these grafts are very important for us to know. What's the difference between an allograft, an autograft, and a xenograft? So an autograft is when they take a part of you and they stick it to a region in your body that was burned. So if they take a part of your thigh or your buttock and they put it on your skin that was burned, that's an example of auto. That's yourself, auto, of autograft. Also, the another example is allograft. Allograft is when they take a part of somebody else in your own species. When they took placenta tissue and they planted it on the face of a woman that had her face burned and it came out perfect. They did transplantation of the face of the woman and it came out perfect. So that's an example of somebody within the same, that placenta was not a placenta of a cow. It was a placenta of a human being. So from another human being to you, that's allograft. From you to you, that is autograft. But if it's from another animal to you, like a pig to the human being, that is known as xenograft. Xenograft. If it's healed, no, you cannot. It's that's how I mean histologically you can. If you go in like real depth and you look in the microscope, you can. But that's the point of it because it's not supposed to look like it. It's supposed to look like you're a normal person. And it's good enough. It's good enough to get you there. But you sure can if you go because in the end, remember that's not your body. It is brought, it's grafted from another species. And sometimes it gets rejected by your own immune system because the immune system is constantly performing immunosurveillance and screening these glycocalyx, the glycolipids and the glycoproteins. So skin color. Skin color is shows variations in skin and hair color due primarily to the type and the amount of the melanin pigment. So there is dark eumelanin and reddish yellow pheomelanin. So eumelanin has varieties, brown and black eumelanin that are responsible for the tan, brown, and black skin. Pheomelanin is responsible for the yellowish to reddish tones in some Asians and Native Americans, while pinkish tones are of the white skin. What are other factors? So the degree of show through the dermal vessels and the white collagen. There's possible accumulation of keratin pigment from a yellow yolk-like or orange vegetable substance that can also be in our skin. Ultraviolet radiation stimulates melanin synthesis. I went to medical school back home in Africa. So when I used to come back for vacation, when school is over, I used to come back. I was so dark, and everybody would tell me that you are so dark. And then when I go back home, they tell me your skin got like really light. And so, because over there, that is an adaptive, protective response. The sun is so hot there, and the sun is targeting the DNA, so your body is secreting more melanin so that it can surface, so that it can protect your DNA from ultraviolet mutation. It's going to cause a mutation, it's going to cause damage of your DNA. So, people are darker in skin and lighter skin. Is it because the number of the melanin secreting cells, melanocytes, or what is it because of? Yes, it's not the quantity. It's actually the amount of um how many is the amount of yeah, how much melanin is being secreted. Do you see? These are variations in skin pigmentation. So, so skin colors of diagnostic value. So cyanosis is blueness due to oxygen deficiency. Is blueness due to oxygen deficiency, and there's erythema, that is redness due to increased blood flow to the skin. And pallor is paleness due to decreased blood flow to the skin. And we see this in younger menstruating girls who do not take their iron supplement. So they're not making red blood cells. So they're suffering from hypoxemia and they are so pale and they have to take their iron supplements so the body is able to restore the genesis and the making of red blood cells. Is hematoma. Hematoma is the bruising, and it causes the clotting of the blood under the skin. So if you look at this, this is albinism. Albinism is white skin due to the lack of melanin. So now these patients, unfortunately, they cannot make melanin. That's why there is a lot of skin cancer among albino people, and that is because they don't have the melanin due to a mutation in the gene that makes, when it's transcribed, it makes for us melanin. So they are so susceptible to skin cancer. So they cannot make melanin. And hair is, you see their hair pigmentation is very white and their eyes are very pink. Did you guys hear the story of the woman in South Africa who was accused, but she had an albino baby? So she was accused that she had intercourse with a white Caucasian male. And she said, I did it. And I think they killed her or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, they killed her or something like that. So, ignorance, you got to get out of there. If you're living in a society where ignorance can get you killed, may want to get out of there before getting married. Don't get settled down there. Go somewhere else. Yeah, she wasn't expecting it, but it was just a horrible thing. In my country, we don't have that type of ignorance. We have a different type of ignorance, but not that. Like it wouldn't get you killed for having an albino baby. But in fact, they think that these albino babies are the children of the heaven. They say the children of the angel or the children of the heaven because they are so white. And we associate white and light with the heaven. And the devil chocolate fruit cake and the devil chocolate cake and the white vanilla angel. Yeah, they have that. The devil chocolate cake. The chocolate cake is the devil cake, and the white cake is the angel, something like that. Is that true? Yeah. Okay, so that was your daily dose of ignorance. All right, moving on. Moving on to jaundice. Jaundice is, when we have hemoglobin, we have to break down hemoglobin. We have to break down hemoglobin into heme and globin. So globin is going to be broken down into, globin is protein. Hemoglobin has alpha, 2 alpha subunits, and 2 beta subunits. Today I was very good. I didn't get fried chicken. I leave it to the end of the day and at the end of the night. Ruth laughing at me all the time. I'm suffering with my. I need to see a dietitian or a nutritionist. Jennifer, she only suggested the fruits, but that's actually is not a holistic solution. When it comes to nutrition, you have to tailor a person-specific dietary plan. But if you make a quick shift into one whole set of diet, going from somebody eating fried chicken right into fruits, no, no, no. But that's sweet and salt. It doesn't work. And I also believe there are gender-based dietary um, choices. So men usually like carnivore, like the man he thinks he's the lion, he want to eat the meat, but like women they're more gentle, they eat like the salad and But salad is actually better. Salad is gonna make you strong. That's not true? Oh, socially. Oh, yeah. I think that. I don't think it's taught. I think it's actually, yeah, taught. Yeah, stereotype. Yeah. I think it's taught because some cultures, like the more fat you are, they are perceived. Like if a woman is really fat, that's the standard of beauty. Like if you are really fat, that means you are beautiful. But actually, I don't eliminate completely the fact that it is biological. Because men from the cave time, hunter-gatherer. The men, they run in the forest with a spear to kill and bring the food home. The men are the breadwinner and all of that. So usually, like the men, they go there, like they eat unhealthy. Like one time I saw a guy who was really hungry, and he was so hungry he decided to eat the cupcake. And he was eating cupcakes. And he ate so much sugar and he was still hungry. But he could have had a really big meal that's healthy, and he would be full, but he did not. He ate a lot of sugar. That's not good. We have to have dietary sophistication. Okay, has somebody had coastal flood advisory? Does that mean maybe tomorrow we're gonna be off? I got a text message that says coastal flood advisory, National Weather Service. Does that mean tomorrow we're off? Jennifer, that's tomorrow. That's not today. That is tomorrow. Actually, that's a very good yeah, I just got it. I got it I got it okay, so yeah, so let's see. Let's go right through. There are two abnormal skin colors. So this is you should have to be able to tell that this patient is suffering from jaundice. Okay, this is jaundice. And this is albinism. Albinism. Okay. Skin markings. So the skin has a variety of markings. So the friction ridges, these are markings on the fingertips that leave oily fingerprints, and that help us have a tight grip. And flexion lines known as uh, flexion creases. These are lines on the flexor surfaces of the digits, palms, wrists, and elbows. They mark the sites where the skin folds during the flexion of the joint, and the skin is bound to deeper tissue along these lines. So markings on the fingertips that leave oily fingerprints, and these flexion lines are lines on the flexor surfaces of the digits, palms, wrists, and elbows. And the skin is bound to deeper tissue along these lines. So the skin markings known as the freckle, these are flat melanized patches. And the moles known as the nevus, these are elevated melanized patch, often with hair. They should be watched for changes in color diameter or contour that they may suggest cancer. Hemangiomas or birthmarks and patches of discolored skin are caused by the benign tumors of dermal capillaries. So some disappear in childhood and others last for a lifetime. So the capillary hemangioma known as a strawberry birthmark, and these are cavernous hemangioma or known as a port wine stain. So remember the skin is not just the epithelial tissue. The skin is also your nail bed and also the very important keratin and the hair cells. And the hair and the nails are composed of mostly dead keratinized cells. So it is pliable, that is soft keratin, and it makes up the stratum corneum of the skin. It is compact, made up of compact hard keratin that makes up the hair and the nails. It is tougher and more compact due to numerous disulfide bridges between the keratin molecules. So hair is also called the pilus, which is a slender filament of keratinized cells growing from a tube in the skin called a hair follicle. So the hair covers most of the body, and the hair does not cover the palms, the soles, or the palmar plantar, and the lateral surfaces and the distal segments of the fingers and the toes. So there are three types of hair. There is downy hair. That's the hair we are born with, known as the lanugo. Then as we get older, we start changing our hair shape, especially for men. So we transition from vellus into terminal hair. But the majority of women hair is actually vellus hair. So the hair follicle, when we examine it, has a shaft that is portion above the skin surface and has a root that is the portion below the skin surface. So in the dermis or the hypodermis, the hair root ends with a dilated bulb. And the bulb grows around the dermal papilla, and they bud, there's a bud of vascular tissue that provides nutrition to the hair. There's hair matrix and mitotically active cells immediately above the papilla, growth center for the hair. So the hair has up to 3 layers. There's the medulla, which is the core of loosely arranged cells and air spaces. There is the cortex, that is the bulk of the hair, and there's the cuticle, that is the outermost region, consisting of multiple layers of thin, scaly cells that develop, that overlap like the roof shingles. Okay, that's the shaft, and now it propagates outside through the epidermis. There are two principal layers of the follicle. There's the epithelial root sheath, and that's an extension of the epidermis lying adjacent to the hair root, and it widens at deep end into the bulge, and it is a source of stem cells for the follicle growth. There's connective tissue root sheath that is derived from the dermis, but it is a bit denser, and it surrounds the epithelial root sheath. It is associated with the follicle, and there are sensory nerve fibers that entwine each follicle and respond to the hair movements. Arrector muscle is a bundle of smooth muscle attaching to the follicle to the dermis, and it contracts to make hair stand on end. The hair texture and color. So the color is due to pigment granules in the cells of the cortex. There is brown and black hair that is rich in the eumelanin, and the red hair has high concentration of pheomelanin. Blonde hair has an intermediate amount of pheomelanin and very little eumelanin. Gray and white hair have little or no melanin, and the hair is present in the medulla. The texture related to the cross-sectional shape of the hair is that it's straight hair and is round, and there's wavy hair that is oval, and there's curly hair that is relatively flat. You see there is differences in the variety of the hair structure as well as the color of the hair shaft. Okay, there are multiple time-related cycles known as the hair cycle. So we have the anagen and the catagen and the telogen. The anagen is the growth stage from about 6 to 8 years. And 90% of the scalp follicles are in the stage of the anagen. So the stem cells multiply, and the root sheath cells above the papilla form the hair cells, but then they die. And after them, you would have the catagen phase, where there would be a degeneration stage where these anagen cells would die. And then we would have mitosis in the hair matrix. And the mitosis in the hair matrix would cease and would stop, and the follicle would shrink, and the hair loses the anchorage. So the base of the hair keratinizes into a hard knot. The hair is called a club hair that is easily pulled out by brushing. There's telogen. Telogen is the resting stage from 1 to 3 months. We lose about 50 to 100 hairs daily. So the hair growth rate is 1 millimeter for 3 days until the 40s. So there are effects of aging. So there's a higher percentage of follicles are in catagen and telogen phases. So the follicles shrink and produce wispy vellus hairs, and alopecia is known as the thinning and loss of hair or baldness. So there's pattern baldness, androgenic alopecia, and that represents hair that is lost unevenly rather than a uniform thinning of the hair. So there's a combination of polygenic inheritance and hormones or androgens, and that is based on hormones and androgens and environmental influences. Hirsutism. Hirsutism is the opposite of alopecia. And here, what happens is there's excessive hairness in areas that are not usually hairy. So the appearance of hair in areas that are not supposed to be hairy. So the fingernails and the toenails, they have a nail plate, and that nail plate is a hard part of the nail, and it includes the overhanging free edge nail body, and that is visible. It visibly attached. It is a visible part that is attached to the nail plate, and there is a nail root. It surrounds the skin and rises as a nail fold, separated from the margin separated from the margin of the nail plate by the nail groove. Did somebody get that text message about the flood? No. Okay. Nail bed is the skin underlying the nail plate. And so there's a nail matrix and there's a nail cuticle, and the appearance of the nails can be valuable in the medical diagnosis. So we know that there is finger clubbing, where the fingers of where the nail fingers are so massive, indicating that the patient is suffering from congestive heart failure or suffering from a form of emphysema. So a friend of mine is a chronic smoker, and he noticed his nails getting severely wide and wide. And now, when you tell the patient who has finger clubbing to go like that, they will not be able to see the window. Can you go like this? Make both of your nails touch, of your index finger touch. Do you see a window? Do you see a window? If you look here in the camera, do you see this little gap? Yeah, they can never, you see this gap that I have? So I don't have finger clubbing, thank God. But if I had this window would be gone. So yeah. Does anybody have finger clubbing? No? Thank God. Moving on. You see, that's the anatomy of the fingernail. You have your cuticle and the linule and the nail groove. This is the nail body, and these are the free edges. It's always good to remove the free edges. But why do people have long free edges? Style. Okay. Because now all of the dirt and all of the pollution and the microbes are going to go inside. I think the people who have long nails, like they have finger clubbing. Oh, it's fake nails. Okay. Alrighty. So the nail is not as that long. Sometime in the subway, I saw a woman with a nail like that really long, like the one that scratched is really long. So that was, I was like, that's definitely not her nail. So it was like this pen. Yeah, I don't think he's in any record, but I think he's like, it was just, that thing was just. Okay, so the most important thing we need to know about the sweat is that this sweat is important for thermal regulation, and we want to ensure that um, that the temperature does not dissipate when we are suffering from hypothermia. We want to conserve it, and we want the temperature to dissipate when we have so much really high temperature. We want it to exit our body. So there are apocrine sweat glands, and these are found in particular regions like the groin, the areola, the axilla, the anal region, and in the beard area in men. But the other type are the eccrine or the merocrine sweat glands. These are most numerous skin glands, about 3 to 4 million in the adult, and there is myoepithelial cells. These are found in both the apocrine and the eccrine glands. These are the cutaneous glands. Sweat glands, they are important for sweat production and composition. And 99% of the sweat is water, and it has the acid mantle, which is 4 to 6 pH. It begins as a protein free filtrate of the blood plasma produced by deep secretory portion of the gland. So some sodium chloride reabsorbed by the duct, but some sodium chloride and other small solutes, potassium, urea, lactic acid, ammonia remain in the sweat. So some drugs are excreted in the sweat. So the types of perspiration. There is insensible perspiration that is not noticed. It does not produce visible wetness of the skin. And then there is diaphoresis, which is sweating with wetness of the skin in response to heat, exercise, and circulatory shock. So there's cutaneous transpiration that is known as water loss from the skin, not due to swelling, but the water diffuses between the keratinocytes and evaporates from the skin surface. Sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands produce oily secretion called the sebum. So the gland structure is flask shaped, and there's a short ducts open into the hair follicle. There are holocrine secretion style, and they keep the skin and hair from becoming dry, brittle, and cracked. There are ceruminous glands. These are modified apocrine glands that are found only in the external ear. They are coiled, simple tubular glands. They produce cerumen earwax, and they are yellow, waxy secretion combined with sebum and dead epithelial cells. They keep the eardrum pliable, and they kill the bacteria. There are mammary glands. Mammary glands are milk-producing glands that develop in female during pregnancy and lactation. They are modified apocrine sweat glands. And the mammary ridges or milk lines, these are 2 rows of mammary glands in most mammals. So primates kept only 2 glands, but a few people have additional nipples along the milk line. These are known as polyphilia. So now we have to talk about what goes wrong. In addition to the structure and the function, we have to understand what goes wrong. So most skin cancer is caused by the exposure to the ultraviolet rays of the sun. So most often on the head, the neck, and the hands, and most common in fair-skinned people and the elderly. So it is one of the most common, easily treated cancers. It has the highest survival rates if detected and treated early. There are three types of skin cancer named for the epidermal cells in which they originate. There's the basal cell carcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, and malignant melanoma. What is basal cell carcinoma? Basal cell carcinoma is the most common type. It is the least dangerous because it seldom metastasizes. So we have to understand the difference between invasion and metastasis. Invasion is when the cancer cell destroys the nearby basement membrane and start to invade the nearby tissue. But in metastasis, that cancer cell has now left the tissue and entered into the blood vessel and swim in the blood to travel to a distant far region. That distant far region is going to stick to the lung, and then you would have cancer that traveled from the bone tissue into the lungs. Squamous cell carcinoma. Squamous cell carcinoma arises from the keratinocytes of the stratum spinosum. And the lesions are usually on the scalp, the ears, the lower lip, or back of the hand. So it is raised, reddened, scaly appearance, later forming a concave ulcer. So the chance of recovery is good with early detection and removal, and it tends to metastasize to the nearby lymph node. That's the squamous cell carcinoma. But the basal cell carcinoma is not. The basal cell carcinoma does not metastasize. Only the squamous cell carcinoma that does the metastasis. Melanoma is the cancer of the melanin secreting cells, the melanocytes. And it is very rare because it's about 5% of skin cancers. And burns are very dangerous because they are the cause of hypovolemia. Burns are the cause of loss of water, and loss of water is going to lead to less blood volume. This less blood volume is going to deplete our tissues from the proper water supply, from proper oxygen, for oxidative phosphorylation, for the aerobic respiration, and that's going to lead to a homeostatic distress that may lead to death. So first-degree burns, they only involve the epidermis, that is the redness and the slight edema and pain. It heals within days. So remember that the burns can lead to death due to the fluid loss and infection and toxic effects of the scar. That is the burned dead tissue, the eschar, ESCHAR. First degree burns, these are only involved in the epidermis, and the redness is there's redness, slight edema, and inflammation. Second degree burn is partial thickness burn. It involves part of the dermis, but not all of it. And it may appear red, tan, or white, blistered and painful. 2 weeks to several months to heal and may leave the scars. The third degree burn, known as the full thickness burn, involves all of the dermis and often some deeper tissue. So it often requires skin graft, and they need fluid replacement and infection control because now the skin is so obliterated that you have all of the epidermis and all of the dermis, and sometimes the deeper tissue, the muscular layer, gets removed. So that is a third degree burn, and that is a second degree burn that has a portion of the dermis, while the first degree burn is only on the top layer. Ultraviolet rays on sunscreen. They are improperly called tanning rays and burning rays. They are both thought to initiate the skin cancer, and no such thing as a healthy tan. So the sunscreens protect you from sunburn, but unsure if they provide protection against cancer. Okay, so that just shows you the distribution of where are the people who are darkest to lightest in color. Okay, skin is done.